This is the Comic Book Kaiju podcast, a discussion podcast talking all about comics, where we love comics and you should too. On today's episode, I have a very special guest, Mr. Brandon Ingram, all the way from Dismay Comics. We're going to be talking all about Dismay Comics today on the show. Brandon, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me. And I want to let everybody know that they can find Dismay Comics. All the links are going to be in our show notes, Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But before we begin, I wanted to tell everybody about Magic Mind, which is a productivity drink that I've been drinking. Magic Mind, right now, they're doing a campaign called 14 Days of Magic, hashtag 14 Days of Magic, where it's all about change and how you're going to do a better productive self. So for me, I've been trying to eat better, been trying to walk more, just trying to be healthier overall in general. Brandon, is there anything specifically that you do, being a comics creator, for energy, just kind of like a pick me up or productivity boost on your side?
I try to, emphasis on try. I try to walk a lot. But yeah, there's always other ways I can get a better energy boost.
Yeah. Well, this energy boost that I'm speaking of specifically is Magic Mind. It's got all natural ingredients, very good for you. And right now, with this hashtag 14 Days of Magic campaign, our listeners can actually, whatever content that you create with the hashtag 14 Days of Magic, it actually enters you into a contest where you can win a 1 to 3 month subscription of Magic Mind. And all you have to do is just go to the link in our show notes, magicmind.co/14 days of magic, and use the discount code Kaiju14. That's KAIJU14. And that'll just enter you in. I will actually select the winner at the end of it, but it's just hashtag 14 Days of Magic. That's all you need. And it's a better, kind of more productive you. So just want to let everybody know that is a thing that they're doing. And actually, Magic Mind is cool because they're donating to the Amazon rainforest, trying to be kind of a healthier planet, healthier body. So I'm digging everything that Magic Mind is doing. I'm also digging everything that Brandon Ingram is doing over at Dismay Comics. And this is the specific comic that we're going to be talking about today, but I'll let Brandon talk about the company in general. But the specific one we're going to be talking about today, Dismay Avenue Issues 1 and 2, which is a psychological horror anthology. 4 different comic artists, 5 psychological and cosmic horror stories, 100 plus pages of pure terror. And we're just coming off Halloween, Brandon. So how did you kind of get started with Dismay Comics? How did what was your Dismay Comics origin story?
So kind of the origin story of Dismay Comics was I started as a hobby writing screenplays right out of high school. Like I loved writing screenplays. Entered some into contests. Sometimes there was good results, sometimes not so good results, but I got a lot of feedback, some constructive criticism. And eventually there were a bunch of ideas that I had where I was like, I could make these like short films or as low budget feature length movies, but low budget in the Hollywood sense, because something like my story Gallows Man, like you need like a $500,000 budget on that, which is low for Hollywood, but for little old me, it's like, no, I'm not going to see that type of money.
Right.
So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I want to see these creations as well as more creations, more stories that I make. I want to see those in some way and it not be limited as well. Because with a budget or anything, it's limited. Whereas when it comes to making comics and the page and the artwork, the sky's the limit. Really, the page is the limit, but it's limitless basically with what it can look like. Because here's an example: Avengers Endgame, like the last fight scene, awesome fight scene, grand fight scene, probably cost them $50 to $100 million just on that fight scene.
Right.
The problem is, I still like that fight scene, but 20 years from now, there's going to be people looking back, nitpicking here and there, like, hey, like the CGI doesn't look so good here, that sort of stuff, because CGI just keeps getting better and better and better, where you'll go back and nitpick something that was $50 to $100 million to make that 10-minute scene. Whereas with comics, this type of art form, you don't really see that. It is ultimately like not comparing my comics or comics as a whole to like going in a museum and looking
Mm,
at beautiful art pieces, but
right.
it's similar to that,
Right.
to where it will hold up. The stories, the artwork, it will hold up, and it's a lot cheaper than making those big movies. So that's why I eventually got into like not as much film script stuff, but more comic script stuff, making comic
Mm.
scripts and making comics and finding artists on DeviantArt. Uh, I haven't used it yet, but Facebook groups are a good way. I found a couple cover artists on Instagram,
Oh,
and that's
nice.
kind of how that started. And then once the comics started getting made, it was basically like, okay, well, I need a title for this series. Like, for example, Dismay Avenue. I was like, I need a title for this, like some sort of horror anthology thing. And eventually, 3-4 hours, I eventually came up with Dismay Avenue. And then within like 10 to 15 minutes, I came up with the brand name, the
Mm.
company name, or whatever you want to call it, Dismay Comics, basically pulling a DC Comics, doing the Detective Comics, DC Comics. I did that with Dismay Avenue.
Nice.
Dismay Avenue, Dismay Comics. And so that's kind of the origin of how Dismay Comics came about.
Nice. And right now, like you said, Dismay Avenue is the one that you have your Kickstarter going on right now, right? It just
Yes.
started. Why don't you give us some more details on the Kickstarter so all of our listeners and our watchers can go support you over there?
Yeah. So the Kickstarter is for both issues 1 and 2. And like was mentioned earlier, it's over 100 pages of comics with those 2 issues. They're not standard size issues, not 22 pages, not 32 pages. Also, that doesn't count ads and stuff, because whenever you look at DC or Marvel, they say, hey, 32-page comic. Probably like 7 to 10 of those pages are ads.
Mm,
But
yeah.
so yeah, you get a ton of comics with that. But the Kickstarter is running from now till November 18th. November
Ah,
18th, noon Central Standard Time. So basically, like little more than 2 weeks currently at the time of recording. So if people are interested, this is definitely the time to get in. Because I also want to mention with this, you're not going to be able to get these comics anywhere else.
ah,
I don't have an online store. I don't plan on getting an online store. I like the Kickstarters to feel like a kind of an exclusive event, something
yeah,
special.
right.
That's maybe isn't the best business model, but I like that. I like people being able to like feel like a Kickstarter's an event, because it kind of is.
Right.
Um, and also getting in on the ground floor, I think, is
Mm.
awesome.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
yeah, so there's that. And with these comics, issue 1 of Dismay Avenue, pretty much the whole issue is one story. It's a
Mm.
40-page story and then a 1-page backup that is kind of like a comedy horror to alleviate some of the stuff you just read. But the main story is Program. It follows a couple, Ben and Mia, who go on a date night to a movie theater that's on the outskirts of town. And it's pretty much empty. Like, there's no one in the parking lots. It's a huge Cineplex. Parking lot's dead. Inside the lobby, it's just the 2 concessions, teenagers, and some kind of shady looking guy with his hoodie pulled over off in the corner, not saying or doing anything. And it's them wanting to go see this movie, but things start just getting creepy as it goes along. And the first third of this story is completely true. Like, it's a date that I had with a girl. And basically, it was just like a what if story, basically. Like, what if it went this direction, this insane psychological horror direction? So I love that story. The artwork is amazing. Jade Sky knocks out of the park. Very much gives that surreal, atmospheric art style, because that's what the story really needs and calls for. So that's issue 1. There's also a 1-page backup in that called Alternate Reality, which is it's almost like a Rick and Morty idea before I knew about Rick and Morty. Pretty much take humans and trees and switch places. So you have sentient trees and you have humans that are basically like non-sentient, like planted in the ground. It's a 5-panel page that is funny and stupid, and I love it. So that one page alleviates some of the creepiness you read in the previous story. So that's
Nice.
issue 1. Then issue 2, you got 4 stories totaling 60 pages in comics, over 60 pages in comics just in the second issue. The 4 stories, the first one's Tolls the Bells, follows a little boy who has to stay after school because he got in trouble, and creepy stuff just starts happening. Like teachers aren't around and stuff, and that's where like the fears of isolation and different stuff just start kicking in from there, and it's really good. Also the artwork for that is amazing. If you like manga or you like black and white art, that one is specific because it's very much like that, and it's heavily inspired by manga because I really like Junji Ito. He did stuff like Uzumaki and all kinds of other stuff, but the story and the artwork very influenced by Junji Ito. And I'm not saying it is one for Junji Ito, but when you read it and you see that art, it's like, holy crap. Some of these creatures are like, dang, this is like Junji Ito level, basically.
Nice.
So there's that one. Then there's Raw Horror, which is also done by Jade Sky, who did the movie theater one. And that one follows a military soldier waking up at his house, kind of unsure of his environment. Very creepy story. Third story is Destination, follows a little girl going to a thrift shop with her mom, and she finds, as she's wandering around in the thrift shop, because she's like, I want to get out of here. And the mom's like, just go look around. leave me be. Let me look around. Little girl finds this mystical looking like musical triangle, and she finds it and she's like, huh, this is interesting. And when she strikes it, she gets sent to another dimension. Not the Beastie Boys song, not another dimension. Not that. She gets sent to another dimension, and super creepy, all kinds of stuff happens. And each time she strikes it, more and more creepy stuff happens. So that's Destination. And then the last story from issue 2 is Acolyte, which is like a Dr. Seuss type art style. That's something to keep in mind with all of these stories. All are very different, very unique art styles. And Acolyte is very much like a Dr. Seuss type art style because it starts out feeling kind of like a Dr. Seuss story. The main character's name is Mr. Hinklehorn, very much like a Dr. Seuss type name. And Mr. Hinklehorn waking up, going about his day, and you see in his daily life, he just is taking crap from everyone, like at the office, at the store, on his commute back home, all this stuff, all kinds of stuff happens. And all while it's happening, he just keeps a big smile on his face and is just like, thank you, sir, or have a nice day. It's like, something's up with Mr. Hinklehorn. And as the story progresses, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, something is definitely up with Mr. Hinklehorn. Yeah. And this isn't spoiling anything, but I don't want people to think the obvious. He's not a serial killer. I don't want you to think the obvious route with this. But yeah, so those are the stories within issues 1 and 2. Again, over 100 pages of comics. You can get these for pretty cheap for a Kickstarter. Issue 1 you can get digitally for $5. Issue 2, issues 1 and 2 digitally for just $9. Again, over 100 pages of comics. Physical copies start at $11. There's some retail bundles. There's a big creator value bundle where I'll do a Zoom consultation with you, as well as you get to see my scripts and different stuff and see if, hey, like, this guy's worth his salt, or like, hey, this guy sucks at writing. Get to see that. And then there's also an exclusive Dismay Avenue t-shirt that people can get. So you can get the comics and the t-shirt, or if you don't care about comics, which is weird, you're listening to a podcast. But if for some reason you don't like comics, you can get the t-shirt on its own.
Nice. Very nice. And I encourage everyone. I actually got a chance to read both issues of Dismay Avenue, and it's something that I'm not a big horror guy, but I like the Twilight Zone. I like those type
Yes.
of psychological, like, makes you think and like, oh, what if I was in that situation? Not necessarily like, oh, I'm trying to just scare you. So I really enjoyed both issues, and especially the movie theater, like you said, the very first
Yeah.
issue. I could put myself in your shoes. You had that experience, but kind of like, whoa, this would be very creepy if I was in that situation. Was that a first date or was that um,
That
a
was like a second or third date.
okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was trying to think of like on top of the creepiness, but also a weird like awkwardness because you're not necessarily like with that person yet. Um, so I was thinking kind of like when I first started dating my wife, I kind of put myself in that perspective of, oh, okay, what if I was with her and then these things started happening and she's very much into horror, true crime, stuff like that. So
yeah.
this would be right up her alley. So I actually going to pass this on to her as well. But
Awesome.
I loved, like I said, that story and the anthology nature of the second one and the Dismay comics in general. I think it just gives you so many options of just like the Twilight Zone, like, oh, okay, I can go on to the next story. I can kind of experience all of these things instead of just being necessarily one thing. So I think that's great. And I think all of our listeners and people, anyone who is watching this, anyone who is listening to the sound of my voice, you will enjoy these Dismay comics. So 100% they get my recommendation. So I would highly recommend everyone go over to our Kickstarter right now and support it because like Brandon said, this is a very limited time. This is kind of an exclusive thing. And I think you're definitely on the right path of making it, a timed, limited thing. So you have to go right now. You have to kind of make that urgency to go there. And I was always like supporting independent creators like yourself. So I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation. We're able to kind of let everybody know that Dismay is out there, and like I said, we're gonna have links in our show notes and everything like that. But I also wanted to get before we end our conversation, Brandon, I did also want to get your not just your creation origin story, but also your as a reader origin story. How did you get into comics originally? What was like? Do you have any fond memories of the first comic you ever read, or how did you kind of get into it initially?
Yeah, so I think like there's two kind of first comics that I remember. The first thing I remember, I was 6 or 7 years old, and I went to a yard sale, and this guy had a shoebox full of comics. They were like from the 70s and 80s. It was Superman, Amazing Spider-Man, and a bunch of other stuff. And I bought that shoebox of comics for like $10 then, and read through most of them like within a couple months, and just loved it. And that's what kind of initially got me into it. Then I went to the mall like maybe a year or two later for back to school shopping, and there was a Spider-Man t-shirt, and I was like, oh, I want this, but that wasn't the reason I wanted it. I didn't want it for the shirt. I don't know if some mall clothing stores still do this. Sometimes they'll have like a toy attached to the t-shirt or
Oh,
the clothing item for little kids. And this time they had a comic book, and the comic book was Ultimate Spider-Man #1. It wasn't like
ooh.
first print. If it was first print, like I'd be kicking myself right now not having it.
Right.
But it was a reprint. But yeah, like those two were kind of the first initial comic memories I remember having, because I got that t-shirt just for Ultimate Spider-Man #1, read it, loved it. And yeah, I've just kind of been into comics since. I got into like picking up floppies or picking up trades like back to back to like read a whole story instead of just one random issue and a random arc whenever I was a
Right.
kid, which I think that's a good start for kids because it gets you into it. But I didn't start reading monthly basically until like high school, whenever New
Mm.
52
Oh,
Batman
yeah.
came out, like Scott
Gotcha.
Snyder stuff basically.
Ooh, nice. You got into it in a really, really good time. There was a lot of creativity that was kind of bubbling around at that point. Anything that you're currently enjoying as far as even if it's not comics, anything that you entertainment wise that you're kind of enjoying at the moment?
So currently, I ordered it like 3 months or 3 weeks ago. It finally came in a couple of days ago. It was the box set of Clerks, the animated show. It was only like 6 episodes long because it got
Yes.
canceled very
Right.
early. I watched that. I pretty much really like it because I like all the Clerks movies. I don't
Ah.
like Mallrats, but like the Clerks trilogy, I like.
Mm.
Um,
Nice. There's
and
commentary on every episode too. It's funny. I
yes,
watched that from start to back, and then I watched it with the commentary just because there's so few episodes. But yeah, I
that's the
love
thing
that
is
series.
I'm probably going to do that sometime in the next week or two is watch all the commentary stuff because yeah, I enjoyed it. It was one of those things where it was like it's kind of ahead of its time because it was like
Oh yeah.
2000 and some of
Hmm.
the episodes and stuff it's like I don't think people could have got it back then, but you watch it now
Right.
it's like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah.
That and then I'm on a huge like Superman binge. Like Superman's my
Ooh,
favorite comic character, and I've
nice.
just been rereading as well as reading new Superman books to kind of find what my favorite Superman book is. Because back in high school, I thought it was All Star Superman. And All Star
Ooh,
Superman is good. Don't get me
yes.
wrong; it's probably still in my top. It's definitely in my top 10. Might even still be in my top 5 Superman books. But then recently, I read Tom King's Superman Up in the Sky. It was like a
Oh,
Walmart book and then got put in trade.
yes.
I read that recently. Love it. I love it. And I was like, man, this is really good. That's what kickstarted me going back and reading older Superman stuff that I read. So I was like, I got to pick up All Star Superman again. This book that is my favorite Superman book. And I reread All Star Superman. I was like, this was good. But Tom King's Superman Up in the Sky was better. And
Ooh.
so it was like a fracture in my mind. I was like, now I'm on the search to see what is my favorite Superman book. Currently, I'm almost done with Superman for All Seasons. I'm rereading it. I love it. So far, nothing has beat Superman Up in the Sky. It's
Oh
still number
man.
one. Kingdom Come is like very close. Kingdom Come is very close to it, but by technicality, I don't know if I can say it's a Superman book. Kingdom Come
Right.
is amazing, but it feels more like a Trinity book or a Justice League book.
Yeah.
I do love it, but so far, Superman Up in the Sky
Oh
is my
man.
favorite Superman book. Now,
That
if it
is
gets dethroned, I'm fine by that, but I'm still trying to see.
yeah. Actually, you know what? If it does get dethroned, no matter what it is, DM me and I'll have you back on the show and we'll talk about it because I actually really would like to. I also am a huge Superman fan, also a huge Tom King fan. So
Oh yeah,
anything
same.
he has written, his whole Batman run, like I love everything and everything that he's doing right now that's coming out. Anytime I just see his name, I'm like, all right, I got to pick that up because I'm gonna like it no matter what. He has not let me down so far. So yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah,
And
Tom
it's also
King is
great.
in. I was gonna say Tom King is in my top 3 comic writers. Like I love Tom King stuff. I haven't finished all of his Batman run. I've just read like the first volume and then the War of Jokes and Riddles
Oh man.
arc.
Dang,
So
I
I
love
got to
that. Yeah.
read that. But everything else I've read and I've loved because he is a
Yeah.
master. Again, I haven't finished the Batman run, but when it comes to 12 issue maxi series or less, he's a master at it. Like no
Yes.
one has toppled that form to me. Tom King's the best at it.
100%. His Vision book at Marvel was
Yes.
amazing. One of my favorite comics of all time. His Mr. Miracle run, like you hit
Yes.
it right on the head. The 12 issue series is like his bread and butter. That is perfect encapsulation of Tom King's creativity and art. So I'm 100% with you. But I'm glad, like you said, that you're kind of going through and re-examining all those classics because yeah, it's you know, it changes. Just like any with movies or with TV shows, like any art form that has writing in it, it's like it's even with movies, the acting style, it changes from decade to decade. And so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you look back and go back to those comics, and it's like I have fond memories of things like Ultimate Spider-Man, like things like that. But do they hold up to my expectations today. It's actually like that with video games too. I was thinking about it. You play a game, and like you said with the CGI earlier in the show, it ages it because of the visuals. But is the gameplay still there? Is the story still there? Those are things that age with time with video games. And so yeah, it's always interesting to go back and revisit your classic ones or things that you loved growing up. So I'm 100% with you on that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I I'm very happy that you told that story. And like I said, if you find something that dethrones it, definitely come back on the Comic Book Kaiju, and we will talk about it.
Oh yeah.
Excellent, Brandon. Well, I'm glad that, like I said, that you were able to join us today and that you have the Kickstarter going on right now. And I want to let everybody know that it is live. We're going to have the link in our show notes. Definitely check it out. Support Brandon and Dismay Comics. I 100% recommend it. And actually, anything else you want to plug while you're here?
I'd say just check out the Kickstarter, Dismay Avenue number 1 and 2. Again, it ends November 18th at noon Central Standard Time, so you got a limited amount of time, and it's only going to be available on the Kickstarter. So if you want these books, as well as if you want to check out my other series, The Gallows Man, I do Kickstarters for it, but there's not Kickstarter going right now. But you can order the Dismay Avenue books, and within the add-on section, like whenever you're clicking a tier on Kickstarter, in the add-on section, the Gallows Man books are there. So if people are interested in getting their spooky, scary stories and then alleviating that by reading some Golden Age, Silver Age, satire, parody, superhero books, you can read that as well. And it's not like poking fun at that genre. I love Golden Age and Silver Age superhero stuff. Maybe it's poking fun a little bit, but I do love that stuff. So I'm not like crapping all over superheroes. Like, I love Garth Ennis, but I'm not pulling a Garth Ennis by crapping all over him.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much again for joining us, Brandon. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on another episode of the Comic Book Kaiju. As always, Brandon Ingram loves comics, and you should too.